I was looking at them earlier. It's like, wow, we're losers.
Well, there's no room for compromise. There's no room for compromise. It's yes or no.
Honestly, we said, okay, so it's 15 people, so it's at the minimum, that's if you have to look, if you have to full parking spaces. If you let the floor comes down, it's gonna back it up.
Birch Boys.
Create one parking space anyway, right?
So is it like local
Something
made?
like that. That'd
Nice,
be
that's
a
super cool.
catastrophe.
No, but it's multi-family home.
Huh?
It's a multi-family.
Oh, it is.
It's very, very
Space.
subtle. It is not, yeah, I wouldn't recommend it to like a new
I hate these chairs, Jesus.
otherwise subtle. Like, you know what flavors there.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Welcome to the Zoning Board of Appeals, December 16th, 2019 meeting. We have two applications. George M. Barnett, to be clear, and Kenny Millington?
Yes.
Yes, sir. And I want to talk about the fact that there are only 4 of us up here. A normal board is 5 people. You need 3 positive votes to carry anything. We can hear stuff, and then at any point, if you say, well, I don't like how it's going, you can say, wait, I want to postpone. I want you to postpone, until you have 5 members, okay? So we're going to hear you first. Come on up here. Have a seat over here. And identify yourself to her, even though you're saying who you are.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Kenny Millington. I'm the owner, along with my wife, Dory Millington. Do I speak to the mic, or can you guys hear me here? All right, so I'm the owner of 23 Champlain Street. We applied for, I think it's a special use permit for our PVC solar, that's not solar powered, I would say that the pieces are solar powered.
This is a variance.
Right, variance. I'm sorry, I'm not really
Right,
versed with
that's
the
okay.
vernacular, I'm sorry.
And
Yes, go ahead.
we have pictures of the fence and all that. The problem, well, the variance itself is because you're not allowed to have a 6-foot fence in the front yard. You're
Right,
allowed a
that's correct.
4-foot fence.
That's correct.
So, and we have the application and all that. That said, sometimes we grant that variance, but the real problem here is that you've blocked off, you can't fit you don't have a full parking area, parking spot. Yeah, the cars if you pull a car in there, it's parked across the sidewalk.
Right.
And so even if that's really the biggest problem. So even if we were to say, okay, in the front yard, I think it's 20 feet, Joe?
20 feet in that district.
Right, and you're 15?
Yep.
Okay, so even if we were to say, well, it's Champlain Street, everything's close to the street and all that, the real problem, aside from and we could say, well, just make it a 4-foot fence or this and that, but the real problem is that the fence is across
The sidewalk.
the parking spaces.
Right. We usually don't park that area usually, and if we have to, we park parallel to the fence. Because I am aware of that. That is an issue because
It's how many apartments?
it's 2 apartments. So my wife and I, we live in the top unit, and we haven't rented out the bottom unit. And even if we do, we are not offering parking to tenants there because of the risk. Because even before the fence, cars, if you have a truck, like for example, I don't want it on my lawn, I wouldn't want any tires on to rip up my side of my property, and that's what was happening prior to the fence. And so we try to stay away from parking in that, and if we have to, let's say for alternate parking for plows, it's a kind of a hard to maneuver, but we would park parallel to the face of the fence so that we would not be impeding the city's walkway. And I think that's if you said is your major concern. Am I correct in understanding that?
But if it's 2 apartments, it's required to have
Right.
two parking spaces. I don't think you can get 2 legal parking spaces there, 9 by 18 spaces. That's,
Okay, see, I wasn't aware
and-
of that. I'm sorry.
you know, now, I mean, before, I think those spaces, before the fence was up, were grandfathered in, correct, Joe? They were, that's parking in the front yard in a sense, right?
Yes, that's
But it was a pre-existing condition.
Yes.
So the question is how, more important frankly than the 6-foot fence in the front yard, although that's important, is this parking issue. Because now what happens is you actually have no legal parking and you're required to have 2.
So my question is, what defines the front yard? Because this fence is on Beaumont Street. So
Say it again.
what defines? I'm not clear with the vernacular or the laws. I'm from
Right.
Brooklyn, New York, so
That's okay.
So okay, so you just have to bear with me, okay? So this is an education process for my
Right.
wife and I as well. So my property, the address is 23 Champlain Street, and the face of my house that faces Champlain Street, I do not own, or we do not own a driveway. So the face of my house, this face where this corner lot is what I was told it's a corner lot, is facing Beaumont Street. So if it depends on what you or the board defines as, or say, okay, Kenny, your front of the yard is actually Champlain Street, and that's just off-street parking available to tenants.
You have two front yards.
Okay, so I have 2 front yards. So you're saying
Right.
each.
You have 2 front yards.
Okay.
What you can define is which is the rear and which is the side.
Right.
Correct, Joe?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Right? So that's the problem with the corner lot,
Okay.
is that you have 2 front lots. You could say, as I'm facing it, you could say the left side where this is the part behind the front
Mm-hmm.
is the rear,
Is the rear.
and the other is the side or whatever, or vice versa. You can say
Right.
that's the rear and that's the side. But no matter what, he's still parking in the front, correct? The side yard does not start till the back, even with the house.
You mean the pre-existing condition?
Say it again.
What, I'm not sure what you mean.
I want to know where the side yard is, that he needs to not have parking in the front, except that was pre-existing, correct?
Yes.
Right. And that's the front yard where the parking is.
Yeah, wherever your property borders a city right of way,
Right.
that's considered a
So
front yard.
that's the issue. Now, the question is, did you put the fence in?
Oh, I mean, if I physically did, no.
Who actually installed it?
No, it's one of he works in construction, he's a good friend of ours. And,
Uh-huh.
yeah, so, yeah, he was,
Right.
he did it, yeah.
So here's the problem. What happens is that he didn't get a permit for the fence, right?
Right, that's correct.
If he'd gotten a permit, if he'd come in, they would have said, no, you can't put the fence
Right.
there.
So on that, like I said, I'm not from the area, I just bought this
Right,
house
yeah.
in July. So, where I live, and we're first-time homeowners, so we had no idea that we needed a permit for a
Right.
fence. It just wasn't one of those things that we knew, and if we did, now moving forward, of course, with the knowledge and the communication I've had with this office, yeah, moving forward, anything construction on our property will do it, but we didn't know until half of the fence was built. So we just went in and
Right.
that's when I got all this information about parking. And even today with the parking spots thing, I didn't even know that was a rule, until tonight,
Right.
about parking space and
Right.
having the rules about parking spaces.
Right.
I was a renter prior to owning a home, and I thought parking was to the discretion of the landlord and the owner, because not every apartment or apartments offer parking. So especially when prior to our tenants that were there, that we had when we inherited I would say inherited property, the tenants that we inherited, they didn't have, there was there wasn't an option for parking. So that's why we're just saying, when you bring up the issue about parking, it's like, well, really, I didn't know that
Right.
about that one, so.
Okay.
So
I'm
it
gonna
wasn't that we
open-
were trying to circumvent.
I'm gonna open it to the board for questions or comments.
There, I don't, I really don't have any questions about it. It's pretty straightforward in that you aren't complying. And there's a reason why we require parking.
Right.
And so I guess and that's one of the things is essentially you are getting rid of parking, and we don't, as a general rule, grant variances for lack of parking, because that's how we govern density.
Right. And I understand the parking issue. Like I said, from my knowledge up until this process, it wasn't to my knowledge, the code, from what I know, it was about visibility, about the height of my fence. And it was a visibility issue as far as having, so like I said, from the education and the information up until tonight, I knew nothing about parking.
Can you move the fence back?
The 5 feet.
Yeah.
That would be, if I were to do that, of course, the expense would be astronomically because there's cement posts, so that would mean I would have to destroy my entire front of that fence, and then that would mean I would not have been able, also moving, if you see the stairs, I would have to adjust the stairs all the way at least to the side, because that would interact with the opening up the fence and getting up the stairs. I had no idea about parking. I thought the issue was visibility, is how it was communicated to me from the office. And I was like, visibility, my house is not even, my street's, fence is not even on a corner of the street. So I thought that this wouldn't have been a non-issue as far as parking goes. I did not know about the parking
Yeah, it's
issue.
kind of a complex issue. I mean, the height of the fence is generally because of visibility.
Right, of course.
So your fence is 5 feet closer than it should be at 6 feet high. It could
Yeah.
actually be that high. It could be 4 feet high in that location, but it still wouldn't address the parking issue.
The parking
If
issue.
you had a gate in the fence, that would address the parking issue.
Like
Something like that.
like
But in its present state, you can't help a car. You're either eliminating a parking space or you're creating a situation where both cars have to park across the sidewalk.
Across the sidewalk, okay. So, so would the issue, or what would need to be done is, like you're saying, or to alleviate the issue, would it be a gate that would essentially open up? That's that what you're saying as far as gates go? 'Cause we have a gate, like a door, to
Yeah,
that
because
gate.
in theory, you could have a 4 foot high fence that ran parallel to the sidewalk.
Right,
That would enclose your whole yard. But
Right.
you still need the parking spaces, so you'd have to have a gate in it that,
that would
Open
open up
inward.
essentially. So my next question is, because of you talk about this is just questions from my education here.
Yep, that's fine.
So you speak, or you say about the parking, right? So I'm thinking, like, let's say that face wasn't there, you're saying that it would be okay if that face wasn't there, and then people would park, and then the front wheels would be, or whoever's front wheels would be essentially on my property, and that's.
You
That's
need
the issue.
18 feet. Because you need whatever was there before for parking. It may not have been 18 feet long,
Right,
right?
that's what I was thinking,
Right, I don't know whatever, in other words, how far is that fence onto what was the parking?
So what was the parking? So this fence, my fence comes, if you see where the grass is, I don't know if you see the bottom there. So I ran it, I had my contractor run it tight to that line. So wherever, right, I had it run it tight to the line. And so.
Where that dash line is there
That
going
dash
across
line
the
is
car,
I-
is that where the fence is?
yes,
Right,
it's
So-
15 feet back.
right. So you probably can see from this car, even being parked, if it was parked straight, you'd still probably be run onto like the grass of some sort in there. So,
So-
that's what the issue, I guess, part
But,
of the issue
okay,
is.
so my question is this. Is there any paving behind the fence?
There is no paving behind the fence, it's grass, sir.
So in other words, what we have is pre-existing 15-foot deep parking area.
But there's no room for the overhang of the vehicle beyond the tires.
I'm not saying that, I'm saying what we have is a pre-existing 15-foot thing, and what they did though is they could drive in and the whatever was past wheel, which there isn't much, could sort of hang out over the grass a little bit, but it was not a pre-existing 18-foot space. I think that's important.
Correct.
Right.
Okay?
So, and that's part of the reason why, you know, I mean, that's what we don't park on that street. And I also think that was the reason why the landlord prior to, like I said, in his leases, didn't have on-site parking, because maybe he or she was
Yeah.
concerned with the.
I understand that, but
Okay.
it's still what you had. But here's what I'm gonna tell you. The only allowed, parking is only allowed on paved surfaces in the city of Plattsburgh.
All new parking.
Huh?
All new,
New parking.
all new parking.
All new parking.
So if you come for a permit or whatever,
Right.
it has to be paid.
It has to be
There's
paved,
plenty of
but
places-
it's already paved.
There's plenty of places where there's pre-existing conditions where it's not.
Okay, but what he has is a paved area, 15 feet deep, I'm gonna call it, because that's where the fence is, right?
That
Because
is
you didn't
correct.
cut the paving to put the posts in.
No kind. I don't even know a guy to do that.
Huh?
I've been having
No,
trouble.
I'm trying to,
No, I know. I'm just, you know, I'm just trying to lighten the
I
mood.
guess-
That's very serious here.
I guess what I'm gonna tell you is that it's a 15-foot space, and if they have to park in there diagonally, not to stick out over the sidewalk, that's, and again, there's a whole bunch to this besides
Yes.
you.
Right. I know.
There's
I know.
precedent, there's precedent, there's, that precedent thing is a big one for us. If we say, oh, you can have this space, but really the issue is that he didn't put his fence any closer than what was whether or not the car stuck over or didn't stick over, the paved area was his defined parking that was pre-existing. His fence is not on what was his pre-existing parking that was defined previously. That's my interpretation here. Therefore, we're not setting a precedent to say that he can have 15-foot deep park, because that's what he had, right? We're not saying that's the parking that he had originally. The question only is whether or not he gets to keep the 6-foot fence. To me. I mean, I don't know if that
Yeah,
makes.
just to piggyback off something I was saying before, when we inherited the property with the tenants, there was no on-site parking. If there's in that parking in that, I know, I'm saying, I'm just to reiterate, and I
Right.
think that was part of the reason.
But we
that
can't,
Right,
yeah.
right, you know.
Well, in a sense, that's true, because there is on-site parking, but
Right,
there were not 18-foot on-site spaces.
no.
There were 15-foot
We did
on-site
not.
spaces. So,
Break
I
it.
don't know if anybody agrees with me or not. I mean, open this, does anybody in the public have a comment on this? No? Closed. I'm gonna tell you, I don't know if you agree with me or not, but I'm gonna tell you that, to me, the question does go back to whether or not a 6-foot fence is allowed in the front on Champlain Street, because he did not encroach on his pre-existing parking.
Yeah, we
That's
did
my
not.
opinion.
We
If
didn't
you
do
agree
any,
with me or you don't agree with me.
I agree to some extent, although a fence is more of a barrier than just open space
Mhm, I agree.
for a vehicle.
So people gotta get Ford Focuses, I don't know. No, I'm not being sarcastic, but I don't
I think
think
he's
we
on the
can-
fence about the
If
fence.
he was gonna put this fence, if he was gonna put this fence in and create new parking, then he'd have it's just my feeling. We still have an issue about whether or not the 6-foot fence is acceptable. I mean, quite frankly, it's
I don't think that's that much of an issue.
not for me, no.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
10 feet back from the corner of the house.
Yeah,
We've approved it on, I believe on Beaumont, farther up the road
yeah,
at Grace.
closer.
Am I correct?
So,
Wasn't,
how about this? How about we
was
do
it
this?
Monahan's place on
Yeah, yeah.
Grace and Beaumont? Or
Yeah,
maybe it was
yeah.
Ash?
Yeah. So how about this? How about we look at the seeker?
Okay.
I think he has a question.
No, it's just a statement. So
Oh.
yeah, and then, just to, you know, our fence is, I think it's a really beautiful fence. People have drove by and loved it, and I think you have reached out to my neighbors who are, I think, what's her name, honey, Tim and Laura, and they are all, when it was being built, they were all about it. They agree that they think it just adds property, beauty to the neighborhood. I think the only visibility issue with my friends would be how beautiful it looks, and when people drive past it, you know, they might have to step on the brakes a little bit.
Okay, we're gonna do the seeker now. This is just a short form. It's a fence, it can't possibly have any, does anybody see anything? The only one is that they did change, number 2 to say yes, but didn't list ZBA and building permit. Okay? And other than that, I'm looking for a motion regarding my ability to check the 11 items on the seeker.
I'll make a motion in regards to the short environmental assessment form for Appeal 2228, that after review of Part 1, that the questions 1 through 11 in Part 2 be checked, no or small impact may occur, and accordingly, the chair checked in Part 3 that we've determined the proposed action will not result in any significant adverse environmental impacts.
Good, seconded by.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Now,
Lisa, did we have any correspondence on this?
huh?
Somebody called about it, right?
Called and to inquire about coming to the meeting, but they didn't.
Okay.
We had no correspondence, right?
Right.
Okay, so now the question is whether or not somebody wants to make a motion regarding granting of an area variance for a 6-foot fence as shown and constructed, as shown on the plans and constructed in the front yard.
I motion to approve the variance for a 6-foot fence in the front yard.
Right,
What else do I say?
okay. Seconded by Megan. All right. And this is appeal number 2228, and a yes vote is to approve the 6-foot fence.
So this is an education process for myself. I feel like I'm on a Senate trial.
Still thinking.
I know, it's okay. Just let me see those two first.
All right.
I work with people
Yeah,
all
think
day. I
how
like to
you
make
want.
people laugh. I'm a medical assistant, so.
Good for you. Okay,
Yes.
so we've solved your parking dilemma. You've 4 yes votes. You can
Okay.
keep your fence. You've got a variance. Please go get a permit
Yep.
for it.
Okay.
I think it's $7,000 now or
Oh,
something.
no, you can tear it down now.
You're all set? Hey, thank you.
Thank you.
Didn't mean to put a scare into you, but it's actually the truth,
Yeah.
but that is the truth. It's also, that's your pre-existing condition.
Yeah.
Had you put that across the paving as an example,
Yeah, that
it would have been moved.
Yeah.
You guys have to
Okay.
figure out how to not park across the sidewalk though, because that's a
Yeah.
violation. right?
Yeah,
Okay.
it is. It is.
You're all set.
It is. Well, for sure.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening. Have a good
Guys,
holiday.
happy holidays.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for participating.
No, of course. Thank you.
Yeah, have a good one. Okay?
Yes, thank you.
Whoever wants to come up, all of you, none, both of you, 3 of you, whoever wants to come. Okay, there's nobody. Okay, we're on camera, so I don't-
Yep.
Okay, so we've been examining this, and although I'm sure it's a nice project, and we still have questions about some of it, and we're trying, I would say, to figure out how you can build, what you can build there that's affordable and returns money without
A little
creating.
history,
Huh?
a little history on the property.
Yes, sir.
What?
Introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm George Barnett,
Yes.
Which,
M.
George M?
senior old.
Well, I know that, Mr. Barnett. But just,
M, correct.
you are George M?
Yes.
Okay.
Just to be clear, who owns which parcels?
My son and I own the northern parcel, and I own the southern parcel. And the intent of it is to tie it all together into one nice-looking apartment complex. We purchased it, and Harry Pay and I bought it in '73, probably before you two were born. And at the time, South Catherine Street was in fairly nice condition, particularly that side of the street.
Mm-hmm.
And the other side was acceptable. And anyway, we tore
I
down
remember
a
that.
barn, and we tore down a three-car garage with an apartment over it, and working with Derek Allen at the college, we built the existing units. And our neighbor at the time was Alan Everest, who's a historian at the college, and he
Mhm.
kept the place immaculate. And so he was a great neighbor, and we got along fine. And then in recent years, the property deteriorated to the point where it was just a dump, and basically was affecting our rental and our visibility and so on. So I decided to buy it, and the reason I bought it individually is both financial, and also there were some issues with the historical house and so on and so forth, which that made that acceptable since I was the owner. And our intent is to make one nice looking large project. We're gonna extend the iron fence all the way across both properties. We've made sure that when you look at it, it's aesthetically pleasing in that we're not pushing the building any farther up than the existing buildings. And we're gonna try to create the same look with the shutters and with the stone. And we want an aesthetically pleasing project that really makes a statement. And South Catherine Street obviously needs that. So anyway, that's our intent. In 1978, we bought Mason's Mill, you probably remember that, lumberyard down on Pine Street, and we renovated that into 28 units, and we received the Historical Restoration Award in that year for taking a historical property and maintaining the look and feel of it, and that's exactly what we're trying to do here. And so it's hard when you're building fourplexes to come out with 11. So what we're proposing fits on the property nicely. It maintains the overall appearance of the property, and I think is just going to make a lovely looking project.
The variances, some are not so bad, some are, and we understand the desire not to merge them financing wise or whatever.
We're going to merge the properties.
I mean, if I
The
may,
final.
Say it again?
We're going to, actually, it will become one property.
Oh, you are gonna merge it then?
Yes, sir.
if I may, I'm
Yeah.
Aaron Ovius from the Office of Environmental Southern Engineer for the project. Looking at bringing this property and developing it, there's two ways. You can either merge it together and look at what the zoning impacts are, or keep them separate and look what the impacts are. If you merge them together, you get roughly a little over 2 acres in size, which is not large enough for a PUD. So we would look at having more than 24 units per lot, which would require variance, more than one principal structure that require variance. Separation between buildings would become an issue also, that would need a variance.
Say that again about separation.
There in the ordinance is a separation between buildings, the plan development, I know in past projects, we've used that
The
formula.
existing buildings?
Between the existing and the proposed. So if you look at that, it talks about, the average length of build. We got into that discussion when we were doing projects on the base, but we looked at it as, we have an existing established facility, looking at it as, one harmonious development. We did a similar situation with Roger Kennedy, where we actually have multiple parcels, but it's developed as a whole. As Mr. Barnett explained, the intent is to make it look like one development, and then upon the construction loan, closeout construction loan, the properties could be merged to look at one. But moving forward, we have to get the right to build, and we thought it was cleaner and simpler looking at it as a separate lot and the variances for a separate lot. To go through the variances, The issues is based on the existing lot size, there's, the ordinance develops a formula for what the minimum area per each dwelling unit needs to be. So if you look at the lot as it stands by itself, you need 2386 square feet per dwelling unit, where the lot as proposed is only providing 2035. So there is a slight deficiency of about 12-13%. But if you look at the overall development, when it's completed, we actually have sufficient area per dwelling unit. The requirement goes to 1959, we're providing 2183. So, when you merge it, it nullifies the need for that variance. Similarly, the lot width, the shape of the lot is rectangular, where the ordinance tries to keep things a little more square. So under the current condition, we would need a variance for the lot width. But again, when you look at it merged as one development, as you see it from the street, again, if you looked at it as a whole, that variance would actually be mooted also. Side yard setback, single family, two family, three family, all only require 10-yard setback. Interestingly enough, the existing development on the right-hand side of the page of the north side, that building also has a 10-foot setback. The proposed building would basically mirror that. What is nice about the development is that there are no rear exits to the building. So there's no doors, there's no patio, so you don't have to worry about someone having to grill or something walking out into that space. All the entrances are on the front. There's escape windows from the bedrooms like that, but there are no exits. So, we felt going from 15 to 10 was not substantial because based on the architecture of the building, it's kind of wasted space because it's not really being utilized. So that's a variance, the 15 to 10. Building coverage, the ordinance requires, again, single family, two family, three family, you're allowed to have 30% coverage, but for multifamily, low rise, it's 20% coverage. Currently, the lot to the north is 22.8, with the south lot by itself is 24.7, but when you merge it together, it's 23.4. So you went from 22.8 to 23.4. Currently it's above the ordinance, but we're talking, 0.5% increase, which is, pretty minimal. And then open space, the requirement is 45. Currently we're about 47. The proposed lot would be roughly 42. But again, when you look at it as a whole, it's 44.6.
Yeah, but you're improving that.
Right. So I mean, when you look at it, you just, right. Could we reduce it to 10 units and get rid of, the 0.4% on green space, the 2% on open space? You could, but obviously, trying to get a project that is financially viable, to try to get enough units in there to make the purchase of the land justified and everything else, we felt that the requests are relatively minor, very small in nature, and that when you look at the development as a whole, it's a quality, clean development and enhances the quality of South Catherine Street. There's a question, whether or not these variances are self-created. I mean, they are, but again, they are all area variances. So the issue of a self-created hardship does not weigh into the decision of the board of whether or not to grant an area variance. So, we feel that it's a good project. Mr. Barnett has been doing, as you mentioned, since 1973 for a very long time. His projects are well maintained. I don't think Joe has received any complaints over the years as far as his development. It's not college housing. He has a very, medium to upper end clientele, seniors, professionals, so they are very clean and very quiet. And we feel it's a good project. And we were here a couple months ago actually getting that variance to extend the 6-foot fence, the iron gate, across the front, because the intent is to make it look like one whole development. So although we're here tonight asking you for these variances, I think as we mentioned, upon completion, they could be merged, but then that would open the door for other variances. So, moving forward, we want to make sure this project is buildable. Something that was brought up in the pre-meeting is the parking for the proposed entrance. We show parking in front of our building as it extends out towards South Catherine Street. We mirrored the existing parking across the drive aisle. I'm talking to Joe, that is potentially an issue because that is within the front yard setback. So as planned, to get the number of parking spaces that we're proposing, there is some parking in the front yard. And the parking has been established based on the ordinance, which is 2 for the first 10 units, then 1.75 for every unit thereafter. So we're required to have roughly 66 parking spaces. You know, currently, you know, they have 24 units rented, and they honestly probably have no more than 30 cars. So there is an abundance of parking based on, you know, apartments and who rents them, and, you know, they don't always have 2 cars for every unit. But I also know in our history of dealing with this board, you don't necessarily like to see parking variances, because that's how you kind of control density. So we try to stay away from parking variances.
Didn't we say that earlier today?
Exactly. So, yeah, we stay away from those because we know they're a hot topic, especially in the winter climate. So we try to comply with the ordinance, so that results in us having some of those parking spaces in that front yard.
If there, again, when we talk about, let's go to this parking first, aside from all the other stuff. If the parking is not allowed on the parking on the already developed lot is what it is. Just like the young guy with his 15 feet. Whatever you got there, it's been there, that's what it is. So on this lot, there's a couple of questions. One, and I understand why it's where it is, but as I look at, I'm assuming that these are staggered. The reason one part sticks into the side yard setback is because you've got units back, units forward, and units back, but they're sort of the same footprint or whatever. I'm wondering, the other question, the front of that unit is even with the front of one of the other ones, but the more you moved the new unit towards South Catherine, the less of those spaces, and I understand why you're doing it, and I think it's very nice how far back they are, but the more you moved it to the front, the less of those spaces would be non-compliant, because they'd then be in the side yard of the building as you moved it towards South Catherine, some. And if they aren't merged, let's start with if they aren't merged. The existing lot is what it is. This lot only really needs, for 11 units, and or if we went to 10, it'd be less, but for 11 units, only needs 22 spaces. And you've got 25, so if you could eliminate, move it forward a little bit, and put some of the last few of those in the back somehow, you wouldn't have that parking issue with that. But is there a strong desire to keep the fronts even?
I mean, I think when you look at the overall development, you know, trying to keep that harmonious look, you know, the proposed building lines up off of South Catherine Street, the same as the existing. The parking is mirrored from the existing condition. So, you know, we try to keep that same aesthetic, you know. Yeah, we could pull the building closer to South Catherine. That lessens the variance, potentially even, okay, we got rid of 2 spaces, say the existing lot's non-conforming, let's move the building forward. But we think when you look at that as a whole, you've changed the character of the
I
development.
love the big lawns, and it's very appealing. And in the back, everything, we have real quiet neighbors.
Yeah, I drive down, I'm not
Nobody
joking.
bothers us back there.
I drive down South Catherine, I live on Catherine, I drive to wherever down South Catherine all the time, I love that part of the neighborhood. I mean, I've
We're trying
always
to keep
liked it.
that front lawn look intact.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
We're trying to make the place really look sharp.
But I guess the question then is, do we wanna look at this like this, or do we wanna look at this merged?
Well, I mean, I guess, right, so I mean, if you looked at it merged, I mean, to kind of go through it, you would actually be, your side yard setback, we're looking at, right now, we're 10 and 34.9, where the ordinance is 15 and 35, so we're 5 foot reduced on the side yard. If you were to merge them and keep the buildings where they are proposed now, we're providing 10 and 20. So if you looked at merge, we're actually deficient on one side and deficient on the total. So you're making that variance potentially greater. Building coverage, right, you went from 22.8, you know, so you're talking 24.7 versus 23.4, you know, 1% difference. Open space, again, 42% versus 44.6, so, you know, 2.5% different. But if we merge them, you got rid of the lot width variance, you got rid of the area per unit variance, but you've added more than 24 units per lot, more than one principal structure, and you still have the parking. So you're not reducing the total number of variances, and in fact, in my mind, you're making the side yard one substantially greater than if you look at it by itself. So if you look at it as a whole, you still have the same number versus individual, and, you know, is it worth that for 1% when you're now making the side yard 10 and 20 versus 10 and 35? So I think, in my mind, looking at it this way, you're granting less of a variance, which I think is one of the key aspects when we look at the state guidelines, and we're not reducing the total number. So, you know, 6 of one, half dozen the other, as far as that aspect.
Just so I understand the 11 units, is this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 units?
No, it's
It's-
4
it's-
units.
Well, it's,
3 units of 4.
right, so it's, when you look at it,
It's 12.
right, it's 12. 12 downstairs, 12 upstairs. I'm sorry, 6 downstairs, 6 upstairs, a total of 12.
But you're only asking for 11 units, right, or are you?
No, we're asking for 12.
12.
You're asking for 12.
Yes.
And what's allowed, 10?
10.6 if your numbers, so if you round it to a whole, it'd be 10. So again, you know, the architecture of this building, the layout is exact mirror imaging. It's just slightly larger than the building on the north side, and that's really just because of the 2015 building code versus the 1970 building code.
No, yeah.
When it talked about bathroom sizes and hallway sizes.
I'm just trying to understand the whole.
Yeah. So it's, you know, I think it's, you know, a relatively minor variances when we look at other projects, other apartment type development projects. This is not out of line when you look at, you know, the density, especially just look right across the street. You know, you look at the college housing, how big those buildings are and their lack of green space and, you know, aesthetic character. You know, I think this project, you know, has gone above and beyond as far as providing that nicer front lawn, the nicer iron gate, that, you know, there has to be a return on it, that you can't just keep making it nicer, nicer, nicer. But, you know, and again, you know, when you look at the percentage of the variances, they are minor, you know, when we look at things. I know we often go back as a, you know, a 15%, 20% variance. I mean, we're talking a couple percent, which is relatively minor in nature. And the overall development, overall improvement to the character of the neighborhood outweighs that, and the fact that the public has been notified and there's no concerns from the public, the benefit is not being challenged versus the.
You're saying this building will look like
The north building, yes.
the north building? Questions, comments?
Well, I guess you mentioned the variances being minor. Let's take a look at it as one lot. And building coverage, 20%'s allowed. And you've got 24.75, essentially almost 25% over what's allowed.
Right. And when, right, and I guess,
I mean,
looking at, right, the
you
existing
say it's
development.
only 5%, but it's actually 25% over what's allowed. So that building is 25% larger than what's allowed on coverage. Agreed?
Agreed.
Okay.
And, right, and note that the development to the north is almost 23 currently.
Right.
Right.
And when was that developed?
Again, keeping the character of the neighborhood.
Okay. I guess another comment, you say the parking is mirroring what's already existing, but you're going closer to the street than what's there.
Right. And, you know, looking at that and looking at the overall site, you know, as I was sitting here again with this meeting, you know, there is the possibility of shifting that lot westerly so that we could maintain that existing setback. So we could, you know, switch it over one spot to get rid of, you know, slide over slightly. And I'm sure we can maintain it such that we could ensure that we maintain the same number of spaces per the ordinance, unless you're willing to grant for that, and maintain the same setback off of South Catherine Street.
You funny guy.
Trying to keep it light, I think they call it the fried applicant. Right, and And obviously, you know, this project still is subject to planning board review because it requires more than 10 parking spaces. So we still have the planning board to go through to look at landscaping treatments, et cetera. So it's, you know, we feel, you know, based on review of the property cost of development, that this is a reasonable request for the character of the neighborhood and, you know, is a net benefit to the community as a whole.
Of course, you're using that as an argument and you aren't presenting any of those facts.
Sorry?
You're using return on investment
Well,
as an
again,
argument,
financial,
but-
well, it was, I'll be honest with you, right, it wasn't prepared because financial hardship is not a requirement for
Correct.
area variance. So that's why we-
But you are using that as an argument to grant it.
It's definitely a significant
It
factor.
does make sense. I mean, if you wanna be serious about it, it does make sense. We have a lot invested in that lot right now. We had to tear our house down, we had to go through the asbestos procedure and the whole shebang, and, really, the more units we can get on there, the more feasible the project becomes. And it's just a fact of life.
Yeah,
I just don't know. I'm not sure what in other words, this is a bare piece of property, the new piece, and I'm not sure what the answer is. I want to see something nice built there. We have to be careful about what we grant, make precedent for, such as the one in the front yard parking is a problem because it, even though it's pre-existing on the other side, it's creating it again. It's just more, this whole parking in the front yard is a problem because even though you're gonna have the nice lawn, you still have cars right down through there. And I know you have it on the other side. I don't know what the answer is. I don't know if the answer is to do it as one merged parcel. I'm sort of asking in a sense, to do it as two parcels because certain variances are easier for that one, but on the other hand, merged, some of them are better, some are worse. The side yard setback ones don't particularly, on the existing, like as an example, if you merged it and now your deficiency is over on that north side, right, is exacerbated as opposed to on this lot. And I think that there's a lot of precedence for more than one principal structure and more than 24 units on a lot. I mean, I think you can go to Catherine Gardens, you can go anywhere you want in the city where we've done this on relatively small lots. So I don't see that as an issue, but I'm not sure if that's, the question is what's the best vehicle to get something built there that works. Yeah, we don't really care. I understand, we're not supposed to care about return on investment. I know everybody does, but that's not our, somebody can't come to us and say, well, if you let me have this, I can make more money. We don't care about that. We're not supposed to care about that. We do care about it because otherwise people won't develop.
Yeah, well, that's the key.
So we understand, and I built a lot of stuff. I understand fully about that. I just don't know, I'm telling you, I don't know what the answer is.
I mean, I guess, right, looking at it, I mean, because, you know, we are having a single shared driveway.
Say it again?
We're having a single shared driveway. So whether, you know, a reciprocal easement agreement that binds them together and or merging them, you know, these lots, you know, cannot stand alone once it's developed. You know, so whether we merge it or whether we do it by, you know, reciprocal easement agreement, which we've done on other projects, you know, what you see of the project from standing on the street
That's right.
is a whole. You know, so Tall Pines, the exact situation, you know, when you stand out the street and you look at it, it can be 10 lots and 90 variances, but when you step back and look at the development as a whole,
Right.
Are you okay with that development as a whole?
That's
And
the
that's
question.
why, when we look at this project, you step back and you look at that right-hand column, it's, you know, it is, as a whole, we think it is not a detriment to the community as proposed.
You haven't applied to planning board at all yet, correct?
Right, obviously, our goal is to make sure we're allowed to build this number of units, because if this board's unwilling to grant the variances, it then changes the architectural, the layout, so therefore we'd have to redo everything on the planning side.
All right, I understand.
And they look at the architectural buildings, the floor plans, everything else, so rather than investing that money to have you change it all and do it again, it's, we felt better.
As the not merged lot, I understand down by the driveway, how does it change the variances if there are 10 units? Which I know is not what's desired, but what is that?
Right, I mean, in theory, if you shrank the building, you would, lessen or alleviate building coverage. I don't think you would change setbacks.
No,
You wouldn't change the lot width, but you would reduce, you would probably comply with area per dwelling unit, very close to it. And then open space, obviously, would go up slightly, so you would lessen them or just barely comply. So again, it's right, you mentioned it's the 45% requirement, we're at 42. So we're 3% under, we'd probably be just,
and you'd be pretty close on parking, you wouldn't need as many in the front, correct?
well, we would still be parking in front, because we wouldn't wanna pull that building closer, so if you got.
No, but
Right.
you'd
So if
only
you got rid
need,
of 4 spots, it would
you'd
bring
only
it back.
need 20 spaces.
Right, so if you got rid of, say, the front 4 spots, you're still putting 4 of them.
You've
inside
got
that building.
14 in the back, right? You got
13.
7, 8, 9, 10.
13.
13 in the back.
13 in the back, I'm sorry, and you need 20, so you need 7 in the front.
Right, so you'd still be parking in front of, east of the face of the building.
So, say it again?
You would still be east of the face of the building, so by
Yes.
definition,
Yeah,
you would
but
still.
by only a couple spaces though.
Right, and what we've mentioned is that we would maintain the existing setback, so when you look at, again, looking at the project as a whole from the street, we are not getting any closer than the existing condition.
Right, no, but what I'm saying is if you went to 10 and you have 13 in the back,
Right.
you need
And
7 in the
Irvin,
front,
right,
1, 2, 3,
The difficulty of going to
4,
10
5,
is
6, 7.
the cost of the land, the cost of the abatement, the cost of, site preparation, everything else, I think there's $100,000 for the lot. Clean up, round numbers, if you're under $200,000, you divide that cost over 10 units versus over 12 units, it's just a significant difference in the cost for development. Right, and then looking, when you look at the severity of those variances, look at other things that could be done. We could actually do a 3-family house and have less green space. In other words, if you go down, we could create a very large 3-unit building and have 30% lot coverage and be compliant, where currently we're proposing 23 or 24. So it's, yes, we're over the 20, but yet I could build a very large 3-unit, 1-story, sprawl it out and cover 30% of the lot and be compliant. So it's, again, looking at the ordinance as a whole, look at development as a whole, look at the project as you see it, you drive down the street. We feel this project is a benefit to the community. It's Sue Seeker.
Questions? No?
Yeah, let's do the seeker.
There's no public to get a comment from, so, correct? Unless, did you want to speak?
He's a neighbor, he's in favor of it.
He's not the public.
I'm in favor of it.
Okay, so we have the short form seeker. It says no on number 2, it should be yes. You need variant, ZBA, variances, and building permit,
And planning board.
and planning board. Isn't this where that dump was in that archaeological area?
Technically, the whole Champlain Valley is, right?
It used to be that these got filled out automatically. It always said that there was an archaeological area and a toxic dump. I mean, the state thing did it.
City
When people did
Plattsburgh.
it online, it filled it out wrong.
So the buildings weren't listed historical.
They've been, the question is there currently a building on the site that's listed? There's not. The buildings
Okay.
have been removed.
Before they got wind of it.
No, I mean, I'll say, to be very honest, they were a safety issue. They
Yeah.
were structurally unsafe.
Yeah, we actually did look at trying to restore that, but it was beyond restore.
14, we should check urban,
Rural, urban.
urban or suburban.
Suburban, urban, urban? What are we? We're like a
Somewhere right in
suburb.
between.
We'll just say urban. For the seeker. Do anybody have any other questions? Not, I'm looking for a motion.
I'll make a motion in regards to the shore environmental assessment form for Appeal 2229, that after review of the answers in Part 1, the questions 1 through 11 may be checked. In Part 2, no or small impact may occur, and consequently, the chair checked in Part 3 that this proposed action will not result in any significant adverse environmental impact.
Okay, seconded by Megan. All in favor?
Aye.
That's the seeker. Well, I'd like to see something nice built there. I don't know. I don't know that waiting for requiring merging is gonna help anything, frankly. I think it makes it, we trade variances for variances, we
Yeah,
add.
it exacerbates the other properties' variances.
Yeah, that's right.
In,
The other
in, I
property,
believe,
if
every
left
case.
alone, right,
Yeah,
is pre-existing, it is what it is.
yeah.
So the real question is then, let's look at this property. What can we do about the parking in the front? And still have the compliant, you need 25 spaces, correct?
For
25 and a half, you need 26 spaces. Right? You have 12 units?
Do some quick math here. So there's 12 units, right, so it'd be 20 for the first, I mean, basically it ends up being 2 because you round off.
You
So
need
So it needs
26
sorry,
spaces.
24,
24.
because it's 23 point.
Huh? It's 12 units, isn't it?
10,
Right.
10
still
required
less
two.
than 24.
Yeah,
Oh, I'm
10
sorry, 24. I'm
10
sorry, yeah,
required
what did I-
two.
24.
And then
Right, so it's
1.75 for each.
23.5, so
Right,
basically
24.
Which requires one handicap space.
Right, so we had
You've
some
got
spaces. over
13 in the back, is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
I guess my point is that if we're gonna keep them separate lots, we don't want the parking to be based on all the I understand how it works. I'm not saying they're not gonna park there, but if we're gonna keep it as a separate lot, we need to meet, I don't care what's on their lot, we need to meet this
So
lot.
if you looked at the 24, you could eliminate that one spot closest to South Catherine Street. So there's 24 on the parcel, which would pull the asphalt paving in line, pull the asphalt paving in line with the existing to the lot to the north.
Right,
Now, is the parking required per building or per lot?
You can park on a neighboring lot with easements.
It's
but
No. The parking requirements, is it per building or per lot?
what do you mean?
It's per property.
Per property?
Yeah, if there's.
So
there's
if they
more than
were,
one
if they were
building-
combined, he would only require 1.75 per unit.
If this was combined, the parking would be looked at as a whole.
So you wouldn't require 2 for every,
It's 2 for the first
Yeah, you
10,
still-
1.75 for everyone after.
but he's saying it's per lot.
Right, but they,
Right, so basically, if you look at it, right, I know what you're saying, so the lot to the north
Yeah,
would be, would actually be deficient 1, maybe 2, if I do my math in my head right.
the existing lot,
Right, the existing lot would be. So therefore, this lot, as it stands, has the 24, actually it's 25 on it.
you're better keeping this as a separate lot from the existing lot.
so the existing lot is already deficient
I think the existing lot might be deficient 1.
in one.
It
But,
might have just been over time, the dumpster area got a little bit bigger or something, but it's nothing.
There's one space you're saying?
but if you combined them, you'd only require 21 for this building.
No.
No.
12 times
It doesn't
1.75.
matter, it goes to all.
I know what you're saying, what happens is you get that, so when we looked at it as a whole,
Yeah,
because it's 36, you get 2 for the first 10, then 26 at 1.75.
yeah,
Where you look at them separate, it's 2 for 10 each,
yeah,
then 1.75
Right.
after. So the difference would be the 10 of 0.25, so you're talking 2.5 spaces total site, if you look at the
Right.
whole versus individually. So we're providing,
yeah, it would bring it down to 21 for that one building.
no, not for that one building, for the overall site. Because you
But-
can't,
but you
if you
wouldn't
look at
have
them
enough.
individually, if you look at each one individually, the total parking for the entire development will be 2.5 spaces less than as if you looked at them individually.
I think what Scott's saying is if you added them, it would reduce the number of spaces you'd need to provide.
If I merge them together, I need 2.5 spaces less than I do if I keep them separate. But
So
what's
essentially 3, because,
right, but
because we had to
but
rent
what's
them.
unique is that the existing lot to the north
Is
is the one
deficient.
that's already deficient. So
That's
it's
already
not like
deficient,
I
the
can
one
make, so whether I look at my new lot
Okay.
as a whole or individually, I still have the same number on it, because it's
Yeah.
the existing lot that's already
Okay.
accounted for that deficiency.
Let's try to help.
Yeah, no, I get it.
You'd need more handicap spaces too.
So, to be clear what variances are asked for, which we have the chart,
So the chart,
This-
I think, is,
this is to, what you're asking for, I wanna just make sure, you have the requirements, this is for this lot though,
which would be
correct?
the proposed 1-15.
Why does it say proposed 1 to 15?
It's tax map
Tax
parcel,
map number.
I-15.
right,
Took me a while to
221-7
find that.
Parcel.
-1-15 is the
Okay.
parcel.
So, we, in a sense, we don't care about the existing,
Correct.
if you're keeping them separate right now.
Yep.
And we don't care about the combined if you're keeping them separate right now. I just wanna make sure what we're talking about.
Yes, so. if
We
you're
are
looking
talking
at the-
about 1-15, and you're deficient 300 square feet, lot square footage per unit,
300, right, 350 square feet per dwelling unit.
right? The lot width, because it's a pre-existing lot, is deficient. That's based on number of units?
That's based on the use. So
On
a
the
single,
use.
right, a single family,
Right.
two-family don't have that requirement, it's only multifamily.
Right, it's only the
that has that.
multifamily, right, doesn't matter if you have 5 units or 10 units.
Right, so if
I
I
wanna
built
be clear about
it's
that,
just,
it's because the lot is only 80-something feet wide.
right, multifamily lots for the city ordinance need to be squarer than any other use, just,
So because the existing
That's so you
lot,
can get parking in the back.
okay?
it's well, let's understand, it's an allowed use in the district.
Mhm.
Because the lot width is deficient for that allowed use is partly why you have side yard setback issues then. If the lot was wider, you wouldn't have a side yard setback issue, correct?
Yeah, but I think in any, again, the buildings
No,
are
but-
not very large.
No,
It's
but
a
when I'm
single
saying,
lot.
I understand that, but I'm saying,
I think it's probably more, for Scott mentioned that, is
that's a
to
deeded,
provide access
that's
around
a
the back of the
deeded
building,
deficiency
which
in a sense.
we do because we control both lots.
How did you access the back of the other lot before you owned the property? Before you owned this property?
There, what is it? Before the building was torn down to get to the back, I mean, there was
They had a
probably,
driveway.
it was probably an 8 foot
They had
wide.
their own curb cut and their own driveway.
Yeah, there was a gate there,
But-
right? Was there a little gate?
But for your large lot, how
Yeah.
did you get back there?
There's actually a 12-foot drive lane, on the south side, so what you see is, per that drawing, we're pulling the existing 12-foot lane a little further away from the existing
When
building.
we built that, there was only 10 feet behind this building, and the driveway were really close, like from here to the wall to the building. And so when we merged them to try to make it more appealing for the existing building, we moved it all over.
Okay, so you kind of moved it
We moved
Yeah.
the
when you bought
driveway.
the, okay,
Yeah.
all right.
We're gonna put shrubs along there and shutters on the back of the building, so it's something aesthetically pleasing for the new building to look at.
Just as a curiosity, when I look at the unit plan, it only seems to show about 2 feet where that set goes back in, but it looks like that the unit sticks 5 feet into the 15-foot setback, right? And that line is almost there, is that the,
I mean,
you
it's,
see the line, the 15-foot setback line?
Right.
Seems to be close to where that steps in.
no, I mean, it's less than, the jog is less than 5
Maybe
feet,
that's just
yes.
because mine's so small.
Right, but again, you know, the closest to the building would be is 10 feet, so
Huh?
we would maintain the 10-foot.
Right,
Right.
right, no,
So some of them are 12 feet.
I just wondered if
Right.
part of it was back closer to the 15.
Well, I mean,
It's 12.
just, well, it'd be 12 in the middle. And
Right, no, that's what I, no, that's okay. I was just trying to understand it.
Okay, so this drawing is wrong. You have a dimension wrong there. The
No,
10
that
the
arrow's
10 foot?
pointing, the arrow's pointing to the side of the house.
There's 10 feet.
The
right,
10
right,
feet
the
is
jog,
that-
right, the jog is a 2-foot jog for the final architectural.
It's not
Okay,
to the
but-
line, Scott. It's not to that line, it's to that.
Okay.
That's an arrow pointing at that edge of the house, edge of the building.
Ah, okay.
Right? It's not, there's no,
Okay, you've got arrows going this way.
yeah, yes,
It
yes.
does,
Alright.
it does still seem to indicate though that that's 10 feet, and then this jog is along the 15-foot line.
Right,
15.
there's-
Yeah.
For the architectural,
Yeah.
that line's in a little bit, so we.
Just the way
That-
it
that
shows on
portion
here.
Extends
it's-
over the line too.
Yes. And again, what we noted was the 10-foot, which is the
And-
minimum maintained.
I don't see, at one point I was thinking if it was 5 feet, if there was some way to not shift them as much, about 2 feet, it would have made sense that we could have like averaged out that a little bit differently, but it, you know what I'm saying, but it's not, it's only the 2 feet. And this matches the 2 feet, on the other building must be about same thing, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is.
Well,
And on both sides of us too, the neighbors are much closer than
Right.
that.
Now, this is gonna go to
You gotta
planning board
build
after
right on our
this.
line here.
yes.
So this is gonna go to planning board after this. If they get approved for variances, go to the planning board says we don't like it, change this, this, and this, and the variances change, then they have to come back to us unless it's less of a variance, correct, Joe?
Right.
So if somehow you change something with them and they didn't exceed coverage by as much, it wouldn't come back to us. If the planning board said do this and move it 5 feet closer to the property line and something like that, then it,
Right, and you know, what's interesting is that you can do single family, 2-family, 3-family, and townhouses. Actually, single family, 2-family, 3-family could all be 10 feet, townhouses, are actually 10 feet also. So you could actually change the architecture to do stacked units put 12 of them, so you have upstairs, downstairs, and only have to be 10 feet off the line. But because
Right.
this is multifamily, you gotta be 15. So again, looking at what's allowed for other uses, you know,
Mhm.
this just happens to be the one item that requires that additional 5 feet, which we've addressed, we feel, through the architectural, because we don't have any outside egress for use on the backside of the building.
I don't see how merging, at this point, I mean, you might merge in the future, but how merging helps us. It creates a
No,
whole bunch of other stuff that
doesn't.
hasn't even been applied for. And I don't see how reducing from 12 to 10, except for maybe getting rid of a couple spaces in the front, helps us that much.
Well, it helps us on building coverage.
Yeah, I understand that, but it also this also matches the other building, and I think that's, you know, the other thing I like, I guess, is that even though there's a party in the front, is that I like that big lawn. I've always liked that big lawn. I mean, I'm not kidding,
Right, I mean, when you look at what's across the street, this is obviously, I think.
No, I mean, I know it's across the street. There's
Standard
one of the
looking
houses
building like that.
across the street is the one with that little tiny fenced-in front yard. It's gotta be about 8 by 10, you know which one I'm talking. And they put the really nice fence and all that stuff, and it's just, the yard is about as big as this table. It's tough, but I mean,
Maybe
but
small
almost
dogs.
everything else there's a few that are back still, but almost all of them on the other side are.
Well, as you know, I mean, again, it probably doesn't matter, but we're dealing with a lot of pre-existing conditions here.
Yeah.
We've got a garage that's that far from our property line on the south side.
Yeah.
And we've got a narrow lot, narrow deep lot, so we're trying to make the whole thing tie together so when it's done, it looks right. And
Yeah.
that's all we're trying to do, but we're also trying to keep it economically feasible.
Yeah.
And with all the building wouldn't be that big if it hadn't been for the fact that we have to have handicap bathrooms in all units, upstairs units, downstairs units. We have to meet all the current zoning, just makes the building has gone from what the other ones are, which are about 950 square feet. These are up to pushing 1,200. So that's all keeping in tune with all of the current regulations that have been tossed down to us.
Yeah.
I don't
Different than-
understand why you have to have 100% handicap unit. We do not have one handicapped person living in our units.
Yeah.
And we have handicap units.
Yeah, yeah.
But now we gotta build them all.
Yeah, everybody, that's the whole problem, everybody
much
faces all the same
government
stuff.
sometimes.
But, I'm gonna
Don't
look,
start.
I know,
I'm gonna look for.
I didn't go to
well,
that
how about
meeting.
this?
I wouldn't have.
I'm gonna look for a motion from someone. I'm just gonna tell you what I'd
They're
like
all
to
looking
see,
at
I'm
you
not saying what
like-
you're gonna vote or not.
What's that?
I'm not-
They're looking towards you.
No, but I'm not gonna say what, but I'm looking for a motion to, instead of a negative or positive one, I want a positive motion to approve appeal number
2229.
2229 and grant the area variances as shown on the chart on the drawing for the deficiencies as per lot 1-15, right? As opposed to they're enumerated on the drawing, when you say for purposes of the motion.
Along with the
Well,
front yard parking.
I was gonna say we
allowing
need to-
where
Well,
it's close
yeah, I'm
that
gonna get to
acre.
that, Assuming that the front single space closest to South Catherine Street on that lot is eliminated, granting parking that matches the existing in the front yard. That's what I'm looking for, how people vote or don't vote
All right,
is the issue, I just
So
want to
you're
know.
He
eliminating
just made
that
it.
one space,
Yes,
or moving, you still need it, right?
we would eliminate it if you look at the lot individually, because we would have the 24 on that lot.
I'll make a motion in regards to appeal 2229 for Class B area variance for George M. Barnett at 5057 South Catherine Street, that we approve the plan as shown on their drawing in our package, is it dated 11/21/19, for the building coverage variance, for all the variances listed, building coverage, setbacks, and open space. Additionally,
Wait,
deleting
do you wanna list the other ones, lot width and all that, or not? Or just say all of them in that chart?
all of them on the chart on the proposed 1-15 lot only. In addition to that, they will delete one parking space closest to South Catherine Street. And there would be a variance for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 parking spaces in the front yard setback, or 8 if the handicap gets moved back into the front, or behind the front yard setback. A yes vote is to approve.
Okay, seconded by Megan. A yes vote is to approve. We have 3 yeses and 1 no. Scott Jermaine, of course. Not of course, but I shouldn't say that. Voted no.
Well, it was kind of, I just, personally, I just felt the lot coverage was excessive. That was my biggest problem. I didn't have a problem with setbacks or anything like that. But I just felt that it could have been minimized, but
Yeah.
that's my personal feeling.
You want to say why, because we do that, because members voted no, let's say why we voted yes or no. You voted yes, just say why. Whatever, doesn't have to be.
Just anything, okay. In mirroring the other project, I think, again, making South Catherine Street
Yep.
a better place.
Yeah, I agree. The biggest defining factor for me was that it mirrored the previous project, and also, I think it would be a good benefit for South Catherine Street.
I don't disagree with it being a good benefit,
Yeah.
trust me.
And I voted yes because I really felt that keeping the front lawn was important.
Yeah, it's approved.
And I understand what it costs to build stuff. I think you're all set.
3.
We'll see what,
You need 3 yes votes.
What is that, am I-
3 out of 5.
It's a 5-member board.
you need.
5-member board.
Oh, 7-member board, it's fine.
It's,
maybe
yeah,
No,
it's always
no.
3, it's always a majority of
I'll- Oh,
the,
yeah, the third.
He
No,
wasn't
it's
listening
all-
at the beginning of the meeting.
I said that. Anyway, you're all set.
Thank you, it'll
No.
look nice.
Yeah, and
Thank
I
you.
look forward to a really nice, attractive project, which I know it's gonna be. I really
What
do.
about you,
Aaron.
okay on the lawn?
I wouldn't
You're
have,
taking too long.
We'll see what the
if you
planning
needed
board,
4, I wouldn't
we'll
have
see
put
what
it
the
to a
planning
vote.
board says. We'll see what the planning board says, right?
Thank you.
Okay, you're all set?
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you
Sorry
very
to make
much.
you have a meeting on Christmas, week here.
That's all right.
Ron gave me a lot of hard time about it.
I'll stand better.
I was-
Okay, you're all set. Okay.
Meeting minutes.
Meeting minutes.
Yeah,
That's nice to have that.
thanks.
I'll make a motion in regards to
This is part of it.
November 18, 2019 meeting minutes, that they be approved as written.
Seconded by,
Second.
who was there?
A bunch of us.
We had everybody.
Everybody. Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
Let's talk about quickly new business training. I assume that you guys went home and
Here,
did
did
an
you want
hour.
to slap my hand?
No, you're in big trouble. Bigger trouble than that, you're taking my place. No, that you guys went home and studied for another hour, isn't that
Sorry
correct?
for 2.
You studied for 2, all right, you get 1 extra for next year. No, but that was okay, it was all right, we technically need another hour, but I'm assuming, I'd like everybody to plan on somehow, really, look something up online, understand some zoning,
Do we need to bring that sheet anywhere that we
Huh?
signed off? There was a sheet we signed off for the 3 hours. Do I need to bring that?
Yeah, that's.
I think it goes back to them.
No, I
doesn't
don't
it?
need it. I think you generate a
Doesn't,
thing that
the
says how
county-
many,
You
that
should
I know
probably
everybody's training.
Submit a
There's thing.
copy to our
Find
office.
it.
We
No,
can
no,
keep
there
track
is.
of it.
I'm just gonna tell you. There's a thing where I approve everybody's training.
What'd you do, throw it away?
I don't know where it is.
And some people don't need it. You actually probably don't need it.
I was a
Yeah, I
witness to you
do.
being there.
Well, we
But,
signed in too.
No, you
There's-
do?
It's somewhere.
I
I
thought you
brought
had,
it out. I
you can
just
carry
don't
forward
remember
hours.
yeah, but I don't, I
Okay.
basically
You
have
didn't
4 or
have
5
it.
hours.
Always
It's
keep
smart.
that.
That's it.
Okay.
It's in
But,
a pile somewhere in my house.
Marissa sent around years ago a good website for review and study
Right.
of existing, other cases
Mhm.
that have been settled. And
Case
it's
law,
the
yeah.
case law, it's good reading.
Yeah.
I'll send it to you guys.
Yeah, send it.
And, all you have to do is just sit there and read for an hour, document it, and send it in. It's, then you kind of, helps you understand how things work when it really gets difficult. Push comes to shove. When
Okay.
Aaron sits there and says, oh, it wasn't approved. Should've
Did
let
you
him,
see his face?
should've let
Does
him.
anybody have any other business? If not, I'll take the motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Seconded by Megan, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, I told Kathleen I'd let her know if we got out early or late, if anybody wanted to go to